So today we're going to take a look at Choke by Sian Beilock. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Um, and the entire topic of this book is why people underperform when under pressure. A lot of the examples in the book come from either sports or academics. Um, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. For starters, she starts off with creating this idea of cognitive horsepower. So most humans can keep track of 7 plus or minus 2 blocks of information at a time, and then that's like the limit of like how many things you can hold in your mind at once. And she talks about how people who have more cognitive horsepower tend to choke under pressure more. And the reason being is that the way that they learn how to do stuff, especially in academics, is they learn processes that require using more cognitive horsepower. And then when you're put under pressure, what happens is often you have intrusions into your attention that occupy some of your cognitive horsepower. And what ends up happening is you no longer have the tools, you no longer have the resources needed to use the tools you normally use. And so you would have been better off had you used a lower cognitive horsepower method. Some interesting tidbits from the book is she talks about how biases, or how, for example, for race, if you prime someone with their race before they take the SATs and they have a race that is associated with performing poorly, even if they're a high performance person, generally you'll experience performance anxiety. So, for example, women with STEM or black people tend to perform more poorly if you make their race or gender be a topic before they take the test. If you don't draw it to their attention, you don't have the same sort of dip in performance, which is one of the reasons why this research is one of the reasons why I believe now with SATs they don't ask any of your demographic stuff until after you've taken the test, in case you were wondering why there's that weird procedural thing. One thing that was interesting was she was talking about some of the data between men and women, and it was performance. I can't remember if it was like on IQ or SATs. And there is this kind of narrative that some people put forward that men tend to have more polarized outcomes. And what the line of argument is that men will have people who perform at the way top end of the spectrum, people who perform very well, and people who perform very badly, and that's offered as an explanation why men achieve predominance of like really high scores in like I think in the top 1 percentiles, like majority men. I forget the statistics, but it's a lot. But she offers up a different sort of perspective in that the differences between men and women, while they're there, if you separate them based on class, so if you stratify it where you have like low, middle, higher class in terms of economically speaking, the gender differences are not there amongst all socioeconomic levels. What ends up happening is they are not present at the particularly low end of the spectrum, and they're present at the high end of the spectrum. And what she argues that this suggests is that there really isn't a innate difference in men and women that causes women to perform poorly, because what's the difference is you have more access to attention and perhaps socialization at the higher income levels, and she thinks that it's not innate but rather social, and specifically social at high income. Also, high income tends to perform better on tests. So you have this thing where there is this socialized difference. And I think this is specifically STEM SAT scores that she was talking about, but I'm not 100% sure. It might have been IQ. But you have this socialized difference that is created, and then and much in the same like pattern of if you draw someone's attention, something that they expect to perform poorly at as a result of the stereotype, if you draw attention to the stereotype, it actually makes them nervous about the stereotype. It occupies cognitive horsepower if it's academic, or it causes them to focus too much on what they're doing in terms of sports, because a lot of times to perform well in sports you actually have to turn your brain off, and if you turn your brain on too much and you focus too much, it causes you to perform poorly, so you don't want to draw attention to it in that way. So for example, what was it, golf, there was this study where with white people, if they told the white people beforehand that golf was a function of natural athleticism, they tended to perform more poorly in the golf. But if they told them it was a mental thing, they tended to perform just as well. So confirming stereotypes. And then for black people, when they told them it was athletic, they performed just as well. And then when they told them that it was primarily mental, they performed more poorly. So there's this the way in which people choke is often is a self-fulfilling prophecy with regards to stereotypes. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in the book. There are some things that I feel are a little bit tangential to performance, but okay, you have to write the book. It has to be, book length. So what are you going to do? But there's a lot of interesting things in there in terms of prescriptions for a couple of things that you can do to help improve performance. Two that I found interesting was throughout the book, meditation comes up multiple times, and citing studies for meditation that what it helps to do is helps to prevent you from diverting attention in a negative way. So often if you say don't think of the pink elephant, you think of the pink elephant. If you say don't choke, it doesn't make you not. It makes you focus on choking, and then it occupies your attention and it makes you mess up. And so what meditation allows you to do is to help clear your mind from these unwanted intrusions. Okay. Another thing that was interesting that was effective is, and I was really shocked with this one, writing your concerns about choking before you engage in the event, which to me seems like something that would cause you to choke more, just because it's priming you to think about all the choking, but apparently it's cathartic or something to that effect. It was interesting. I would want to take a closer look at the studies because it's not in line with my intuition, but okay. It was interesting. So let's get into the ratings. For utility, I give it a 7.5. There's a ton of stuff in here for performance, and while it's not necessarily talking about how to achieve effective performance, it's talking about how not to choke. And I think a lot of times people focus too much on when they are trying to improve their way they perform in some ways, they just try and focus on only improving their A game, and they don't focus on improving their F game. And your performance is a range. It's like a bell curve where you're going to have really good performances and really bad performances. And if you want to improve the average of your performance, you should also try and improve when you fuck up really bad. You want to make it so it's not as bad, which is a really good way to improve your average that is underutilized. So there's that. For entertainment, I gave it a 5. There's some stuff in there that's entertaining. It's her background is a psychologist, not a writer, so it's not like it's well written, but it's like it's written from an academic, so okay. Interesting, I gave it a 7. I feel that the performance is something that everyone has to deal with, and so it's hard for it not to be interesting to people. Novelty, I gave it a 7. There are some counterintuitive things about performance I found in here, and I thought that learning about these things was really interesting, especially I struggle with performance anxiety with almost everything, and my approach has always just been over prepare for stuff, and perhaps under compete and just kind of dodge competition, while still just trying to improve skill. But I found the thing where the more cognitive horsepower you are, the more prone you are to choking. While it doesn't necessarily mean that I have more cognitive horsepower, I found it comforting in a way, and it also made a lot of sense. I think I overthink things sometimes, and it also clarified the approach for trying to perform better, in that a lot of times I just need to clear my head, whether it's an academic thing. Curiously, I've never had performance anxiety for tests. That's like the only thing I've never had performance anxiety. But like playing chess in a tournament, I tense up. So I think that the meditation being an interesting approach comes up multiple times, and so that I think that contributes a lot to novelty, where if you have a certain type of leak in terms of choking, and this plugs the leak, that is a huge boon to whatever you're trying to do. So style, I gave it a 5.5. I thought it was fairly engaging. It's not like overly academic. It's like written in an approachable way. You can tell that her background is science rather than writing, which is how it goes with books. Like a lot of nonfiction books, when they're written by writers, you're like, they tend to not have as high fidelity to portraying information in a really good way or an accurate way or a nuanced way, and so the information's not as good, but it's not as entertaining. And then when you get something that's written by which one did I say? The writers tend to write books that are entertaining and engaging, but perhaps the information's not as good. The scientists tend to write books where the information's really good, but perhaps are not engaging or entertaining. So, like, what are you going to do? I thought this book was extremely solid, so it got a solid rating. Readability, gave it a 6. Easy to read, tons of examples. There's some parts that she starts talking about brain structures, which perhaps is a little bit off-putting, so okay. Difficulty, I gave it a 5, largely to do with the neuroscience aspects, which I think I need to kick difficulty up for those more often. I've read a lot about, brain physiology and that sort of stuff, to the extent where I don't think I notice it as much, but I think it does increase difficulty. A lot of people don't know what is associated with, like, the amygdala, like the hippocampus, the frontal cortex, all that sort of stuff. So, like, what are you going to do? So that gives it an overall rating of a 6.14. I would actually recommend this book quite broadly, especially for people who compete or otherwise, for people who compete in anything, would recommend. And then specifically for people who have a particularly hard problem with choking under pressure, even if it's not under competition, I think that this is a good look, especially because a lot of times we only focus on improving the top end of our performance. We don't really think about improving the bottom end of our performance, which is a shame, because you're looking to you shouldn't only pay attention to one end of the bell curve. It's the entire thing. As far as discussion goes, does anyone have any particular strategies that they like to implement to try and choke less, or any stories of one time they really flubbed it? Anyways, if you liked this video, feel free to give it a like. It helps out. Or subscribe. Helps even more. And have a good one.